Welcome to the L36 podcast, where we explore cultural insights and share stories of people making an impact to inspire growth and fresh perspectives. We're your hosts, Stephen Pierce, founder of L36, and Nina Winstead.
Hi.
And today we're excited to have Zoe Lumiere, who specializes in uncoaching, a process that dissolves the deep-seated blocks of unworthiness, trauma, and fear, allowing the innate joy and wisdom of the true self to shine. With over 2 decades of study, hundreds of people and couples coached, Zoe brings unparalleled depth, compassion, and trust to her work.
Yes, so we're doing a grassroots research for our upcoming documentary on beauty and the soul in Tuscany. And last week we spoke about creativity with Eric Lumiere. And he told us we just had to speak to you, Zoe, and ask you about forgiveness. And I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. So thank you for joining us. Welcome, Zoe.
Thank you so much, Nina
Yes.
and Stephen. Yeah, excited to see where this conversation takes us.
Yeah. Likewise.
Yes.
Likewise.
Can I start with just maybe you can share a little bit about your work? You know, I've heard phrases like spirituals or terms like spiritual psychology, and maybe you can explain what that is and what type of work you do for people to help them access their true self.
Such a wonderful question, such a massive question. And as soon as you started to ask that, Nina, what flashed into my mind was, and I haven't remembered this for a while, but I actually started doing a master's of clinical psychology back in Australia in my early 20s. And it was actually because I was also parallel on my spiritual journey at that same time. I had a very juicy, really rough childhood. Mum died when I was young, sexual abuse, a lot of really rough stuff. So started to get into drugs and alcohol, a lot of really dysfunctional things. So for me, finding meditation and starting to find someone that could support me into a spiritual perspective where I could start to use love to make sense of some things really was important to me. So I was in this clinical psychology, really, I think because I wanted to support myself in healing some of the pain I was going through, but there was no love. There was no spirit. There was, I remember even doing a class basically that was like, anyway, I won't get into it, but it was almost like a little cold, a little harsh, very, very clinical. So I let go of psychology and I actually went into headhunting and I did a lot of other things, but I eventually came to work for my spiritual teacher and I just fell more and more and more in love with this idea of love as who we are and maybe all of those challenging human experiences that we're going through, maybe they're all this beautiful way for us to learn how to love ourselves more, really experience more fully that we are the love and the compassion that we need. It's not outside of ourselves. So eventually, track forward 20 years later, I then did my master's in spiritual psychology, and then that all just resonated so profoundly. And really, to come back to your question as to like what is spiritual psychology? Well, number one, I have no idea. It's a beautiful adventure. I'm so grateful that I'm on, and I feel like I'm continuing to every day expand more fully into how do I access the love that I am, the compassion that I am, that beautiful spiritual being that I am, in service to giving my human what she needs so that I'm not showing up through my conditioning, through my fear, through my lack, through my pain and trauma. But so I love the term that you both use often. So I'm showing up in my original innocence, my authentic self, that little Zoe that I was when I was very little, right? She just knew what she wanted and she was free.
Yeah.
So it's this beautiful dance of how do I continue to awaken into the love that I am, so that I can flood the little Zoe, the human hurts, the human pains, with that loving, so that I'm not showing up in this world through fear and lack, but through love and courage and trust and original innocence. And as I'm saying that, the one thing I'll just wrap with that on is that our professors, Doctors Ron and Mary Hulnick, would say that healing is the application of loving to the places that hurt. And that has been my guiding light, both in my own healing journey, also with clients in so many ways. And it really is this never-ending journey, because there really isn't this perfect formula that we think there is. Love is as infinite and as love is just infinite, and it can show up in so many different ways. So it is definitely about letting go of it has to be this way, and just really continuing to awaken to what is it that we need? How is love going to serve in this moment?
Yeah. I love that.
Oh,
I love
beautiful. Yeah, it is just, as you speak about it, you are radiant as you're speaking about it. And I'm sure your clients feel the same way. And what a way to heal yourself and through healing others. It's just very, very, very beautiful.
It's honestly such a gift. And I can't, it was actually a video that we watched while I was in the University of Santa Monica, the Masters of Spiritual Psychology, that someone did share something to the essence of, if you are supporting someone, healing them, doing some kind of healing work, and you yourself are not getting healed, then there is something amiss, right? If we're truly allowing that love that we are to be what flows through us to support another, like, hey, it's clearing us out. It's healing us. It's truly working wonders and magic within our consciousness. So I'm grateful. I got out of headhunting and executive recruitment, and I'm doing this. It's one of the best decisions I ever made, for sure.
I think it's interesting that you talk about this, the clinical psychology to the spiritual, because, like even last night, I was playing around with Chat GPT. And I was asking it, like, if you're coaching somebody, like, what is the most transformative experience that someone can have? And it goes into this, kind of, and I asked it to be evidence-based. And so it goes into cognitive behavioral therapy. And so I start reading about cognitive behavioral therapy, and I'm like, wow, this is really interesting. And then it's saying, we're basically looking at the blocks in the story that you tell yourself. And then I'm like, wait, there's this whole other spiritual perspective. These two are saying are leading to the same thing, but they feel so different. And the feeling different part is so interesting to me, because it's like, depending on how you say it, will it resonate with people or not? I would rather be on the adventure of my life, and on this wild journey. Whatever's going on clinically, it's happening. It's true. I read it from that perspective too. But it's like, gosh, it's so much more fun to just be like this little warrior poet out there, fending for myself, finding my way, and yet you're arriving at the same conclusions. It's just the way that it happens. It's so interesting to me.
Yeah, it really is. It does remind me of something that I heard from Dr. Gabor Mate recently.
Yeah.
He read or was involved with a study where they observed different clients that were really making strides ahead in their own life to try and identify what's really working when a therapist, when a coach is with a client, what's really working. And the number one thing that they were able to identify is that when the neurology, the same imaging of the therapist was going on at the same time with the client had greater healings and awarenesses. I don't know how they developed this, but this is what
interesting
Mate was saying. And for me, it really highlights the power of what I believe my work and just really spiritual psychology is, that we're not here to sit up above anyone.
Yeah,
but, right. We all know hurt. We all know anger. We all know what it is to be a human and how effing challenging it is.
Yeah.
So if that healer, that friend has the courage to really be in that heart open, centered place while someone's pouring out their heart, it actually doesn't matter a whole lot what we say or where we take them. That actually, I think, is so overrated. But if we have the courage to really be with them and to love them, and
Yeah.
it's a profoundly healing thing. And on that, if we've actually also already healed a lot of our own challenges, we find ourselves resonating with the person in front of us in the way that Gabor Mate would call the fifth level of compassion, which he calls the compassion of possibility, where it's we can resonate and feel so fully with someone, but we have this embodied experience that our suffering and our pain and our challenges, they've given us love, they've given us growth, they've given us so much. So that if we can be with someone in that pain, but also kind of still resonate in a spiritual sense of like, yes, it's fucking painful, yes. And I know that it's going to take you somewhere so, so beautiful, so expansive, so, so light. There is something there that I struggle to put words on because it's so magical and transformative.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
And do you see your clients being able to arrive at that place? I saw that you work with individuals and couples. What is that like for you to be able to facilitate that, to see that
Well, so I will say that this was a challenge for me early on, right? I really wanted a formula. I wanted a step by step, like what are the questions that I ask? And then really what is it? But the more that I've done this, the more I am so aware that it isn't me that's doing it. And the more I'm like, oh, what is it? The more I truly surrender and show up really, kind of excited to see what shows up. I have my own experience of what love and compassion is. And so that is always my guiding light. But every session is incredibly different. And I think the couples work perhaps is the most dynamic. That's, I love it because it's actually profound as to what happens if true people can genuinely just learn how to listen to each other and actually just authentically come to a place of compassion for the other, like come down. But it's so wild just how we often fail as a listener, as a human being, particularly when we're trying to coexist with someone. But generally, when I'm with a client, I'm really just doing my best to love them so fully, such that they might find that same loving for themselves. Because I do experience that the only thing that holds us back from living our original innocence is some little part of us that got stuck and somehow doesn't believe that we're worthy of love. So we're either trying to prove being successful, making a lot of money and hustling, and that's how I'm going to get my love, or it manifests in so many different ways. But if we can awaken to find that whatever we're going through isn't anything to be judged, isn't anything except to be loved and truly just picked up, and then those negative patterns, those arguments, whatever really seems to be the problem, it is miraculous how they fall away. They're all of a sudden not that important anymore.
Yeah, it's funny that I think some of the time my favorite things, one of these exercises was putting little Steven, me, on my shoulders and just playing around with him. And every time I think of doing that, I mean, I remember who this kid was, and I'm like, it's just so much fun to do that. It, for me, it like, we have two little girls, I'm sure Eric told you, but it's like, man, playing with them feels like, playing with this little boy inside of me, but it also like lets out that little boy inside of me. And I'm like, the kid gets to go out and have fun. And my wife doesn't seem to mind. And
I love it.
And it's so much fun though, just to what's the word? The permission, I think, to allow that and not to wear a persona of, whoever I think that I'm supposed to be for society or my family or all that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, letting go of that and just playing. But in our household, we like to be really
Very serious people.
very serious, very silly. Yeah. Silliness
Like
drives.
beyond silly, like random, like things that we were talking about that when we grew up, we didn't do. You know, we were like, did you ever have random dance parties? No. Did you? No.
Yeah.
Or
We do now.
Or like we performed surgery on Steven last night with our kids.
Yeah.
And it was just like really, really goofy stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't thought a lot about this, but if you were to ask me what's probably the one thing or one of the things that makes my marriage the most successful, I would say it's our ability to be big kids and to be goofy and to allow, to do the smallest amount of adulting as possible. Like, yes, I have to pay bills and there are things that I have to do, but if I can make the most space to be free and childlike and all the things you're saying, I think it is just genuinely so underrated, but such a key.
Yeah. But like, so if you have like a client,
Yes.
and do you ever like tell them to explore their inner child?
100.
So like what, I'm just curious, like what kind of things do you talk about?
Yeah.
Can we break it down?
Yeah, for sure. So my process definitely has been born from my own experience. I loved the methodology that emotional gestalt therapy gives us. The work that I now do is definitely could be considered a trauma-informed somatic form of therapy, because in my experience, if we stay up in the head, I'm not a huge fan of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. If we stay up in the head and kind of just look at it from our mental perspective, generally we're already doing the things we think we know to do.
Yeah.
For me, particularly with clients, it's really supporting them in allowing themselves to profoundly experience their emotion. That gives us the back door into their unconscious, where we can find the blind spots of like, well, why am I still doing this addictive behavior? What, like the blind spots, the things that it's like, I really don't want to be doing this, but I am.
Yeah.
The emotions, and spiritually, we do believe that it is on the emotional level where most of the karma is stored. So if we can really get into the emotions, it's wild how either an image from childhood will just pop in, or just some kind of belief or thought or some commitment that we made. Like, I'm never going to love so-and-so, or I'm never going to be vulnerable again, or I'm never going to let anyone hurt me like that. We can find these beautiful commitments or these judgments or just these patterns, these flows of energy that we committed to. And once we see them through that emotional, it's like it makes sense. And I have so much compassion that Zoe would have done that. Little Zoe would have done that to protect herself. Yeah. I don't need that anymore. Like, I'm safe. I'm a big girl. I have a voice now. I have power. Didn't back then, but I do now. Yeah. So the biggest thing, and I'd say the biggest hurdle working with clients, is really getting them out of their head.
Yeah.
And wanting to tell you the story of all the things that are wrong and all the things they're trying, and just like act to just letting go and getting in their body, and like a small kid, like really feeling it, really letting themselves fall apart.
Big feel.
Because if we do, some stuff just floats in and it's magic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw the slight cringe when he was talking about cognitive behavioral therapy. Yeah, but it's great though, you know it from that perspective, from a clinical's perspective. And when you say somatic, it's really feeling, like you mean feeling the emotion in your body, what that feels like, just
correct,
with no reins, as though there's no one else in the room. And
also, you know, this is what is very hard when we've been adulting for as long as we have. It is actually very hard just to feel a feeling, but not to hold on to the story, to the reason, to the blame, to the why. When I ask a client, like, how are you feeling, right? Often it'll be like, well, you know, I feel like my husband shouldn't have done X, Y, Z, right? So usually what we think are feelings is actually our projection or our blame out in the world. And even then, if you get someone into their body, like, well, okay, how do you feel? The fact that your husband cheated on you, right? Like how does that feel? It's still very vulnerable and very threatening to let go of. Well, no, it's because of him that I feel this. It's hard to let go of that, to really then get into your body and to just go, I feel small, I feel worthless, I feel like I don't matter, and to really focus on that, because I want to say 100 times out of 100, if not 99 times out of 100, what's going on in our current life is really just triggering us, helping us find much earlier wounds. There is no coincidence why the patterns of our childhood just keep getting replayed and replayed and replayed. So if we have the courage to go, it's not about what my husband's doing right now, but there is an experience in my body that's hurting and that is in pain. And we can very, very easily, and this is what somatic therapy is great at doing, it really just finding out, well, what do I need, right? Like actually, emotions are just energy and motion. First of all, if we'll get out of our head and our brain and blame and projection and just trying to like fight for survival up here, if we just get in our body, most emotions actually only last 90 seconds. There's a lot of wonderful research about that. If we actually just hang in to feel the pain, feel the agony, whatever that is, it actually usually does move through. Not always, but sometimes we actually just find it lifting and we can kind of see all of a sudden much more clearly. But what we can also do once we're in that emotion is be aware of what we need. And in my experience, if we can really allow ourselves to be aware of what we need, we can then give ourselves what we need, which is what didn't happen when we were little. And so we decided to create a coping mechanism so that we could get, oh, if I'm a good little girl, then I'll be loved. If I'm XYZ, then I'll be safe, then I'll be loved. Actually, no, we don't need an impressive career. We don't need to be a good little girl. We can just pick ourselves up and love ourselves and truly start to experience that wholeness, that love, that worthwhileness right now. Here changes everything.
Yeah.
And this, that kind of leads me to this thought about, you talk about how the work is this way, not outward. It's not about what someone did or blaming someone else, or, and it may not even be about forgiving someone else. And I always hear people talk about this compassionate self-forgiveness. Yeah. And I can see that's a big part of your work. Can you kind of break that down for me, what that looks like?
Yes. So this is deep. This is real. And I think the only way that I can really share this authentically is maybe to speak about myself and some of the big, heavy lifting healing that I've been through. So I was sexually abused when I was little, and I actually wasn't with a man until much later in life. I never had a boyfriend. It wasn't until I got together with my husband, Eric, that I actually had a relationship with a man. So, at 33 years old, I could probably look back and say, I'm pretty effed up, right? Like I should probably do something about this. Mm-hmm. And I did CBT, I did a bunch of different things, but for whatever reason, there was just like this unconscious block of, I'm not going to set myself up to be hurt by a man again. I was actually so painfully stuck in an unrequited love pattern my whole life. I would only fall in love with men that didn't love me until this point where I was really able to, I started this journey through the University of Santa Monica, and I will be always forever profoundly grateful for finally doing this work. But I got to really experience Zoe in the profound pain and the confusion and just all that went through that. And I didn't have to relive it as much as one might think. But what I did find in going through this process is that I found the judgments that I began to hold against myself because of that process. And I didn't find them until I was willing to fall apart in it. And that's why I like to talk about myself in this way, because it's easy to see that perhaps, oh yeah, I need to forgive my abuser. Wildly, right? What actually happened to me at that time that was the most damaging was actually that I started to hold certain judgments against myself. And like, I was not my fucking fault, right? That I started to judge myself as dirty or tainted or not worthy of particular things. But that got stuck in there. And so that's the real challenge about trauma. It's the empowering thing about trauma. Like, the power is within us. It's actually not because of what happened. I do 100% believe we can heal our neural pathways and heal those effects. And we know that now. We can heal those effects of that trauma. But it's quite courageous to really be able to know that it's not our fault. It's not our fault, but we do need to take responsibility, even when we were very little, for like, oh, wow, oh my God, I'm the one that's been telling myself that I'm dirty and I'm wrong and I'm not lovable. It's like, oh my God, like, when I came to that place, and there's still like such love that comes present for this, it's like, I'm so sorry that I ever told you, little Zoe, that you were responsible for that, or you're anything but beautiful and worthy of the cleanest, kindest touch, right?
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many times I've picked her up and told her it's not your fault. And so it's wild to think about compassionate self-forgiveness. Like, I was abused. Why would I forgive myself? Well, it's quite courageous journey, but really that's where all the power is, because it's only what we hold on to, what we make true about ourselves, that has any power over us moving forward. Because I'm not in touch with those people anymore, but because I had the power and the self-love to fall apart so fully that I could find those judgments as, oh wow, and then great, I can let it go. And the fact that my life just changed so dramatically in 12 months, and now, you know, I'm sure you both feel the same, but I have the best marriage on the planet. Like, husband on the planet, like it could not be any better. And to think that I went so quickly from just being addicted to assholes that never loved me, I never went on more than a second date, but I was in unrequited mental fantasies with men for years, and then did this work, really cleaned up like how I was treating myself and loving myself. And it wasn't my fault. I don't hold it against myself. It was just my beautiful adventure through life. But I'm so grateful I had the opportunity to pick her up and set it straight. Give her the love that she deserved back then, but it doesn't matter. I gave it to her eventually, and now she's still on that healing journey, right? We never get to a place where we're healed. I believe there's always more, but the fact that I've been able to manifest such an incredible relationship, I think, well, I'm just so grateful for it.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And it's also so powerful to hear you use your story to describe that, because I've heard Stephen use that term maybe a million times, not a million, a dozen times, but I don't think I quite understood it maybe as fully, because of it. You know, it just made it just makes so much sense too for me to think about my daughters. And when I see them, I get a flash of myself as a little girl. Sometimes I'll see them and I'll think, oh, that's little Nina. And I think about, well, if someone told little Nina or yelled at little Nina and she was scared because of it, I would think, well, there's something really wrong with that person. It really shifted my perspective that I didn't even realize that there was a smaller me that had even believed that I'd done anything wrong.
Yep.
So the, having to have good grades and do the right thing and say the right thing and be perfect was where my worth was.
Yep.
I just thought, wow, I can't believe anyone would ever make this perfect being that I can see in front of me ever feel like they were anything but perfect.
Yeah.
And it just really, in just like those moments, just made me really think, wow. But I probably need to take it much further as far as, the meaning that I made of it at that time, and all that somatic work that you're describing. But it's really, it's very eye-opening, and I just really appreciate you sharing that. And if you could even go like further as far as like why compassionate self-forgiveness? Why not just self-forgiveness?
Yeah.
We kind of touched on this a little last we spoke, but I'm curious to know your thoughts.
So there is a woo-woo spiritual answer for you that I have.
Do both. Yeah.
There is also because I am writing a book about grief, pet grief, and really, compassion, I believe, is the big. Well, I'll be bold. I'll say that I believe that self-compassion is the missing link to almost everything on the planet. Definitely to grief, but also for creativity, productivity, nations, success in everything. So woo-woo, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but it's present, so I'm just going to trust my authentic self and run with this.
Yeah.
There is something profound that I experience that happens when I allow myself to compassionately be as human as I possibly can be. So if I'm relating to myself and going through something, I can kind of like sit on the top of the hill and just look down and go, oh, that happened, right? Poor Zoe, or it's going to all work out. God's good, But there is something that happens when I have the courage to really compassionately feel my suffering. It's almost like the worlds collide. It's almost like heaven comes down into this earth if we're willing to, in the same moment, be completely human, really allow that into this present moment, to feel completely hopeless, completely unloved, feel completely like a failure. Really allow it. And what we do now know through neuroscience, there's a lot of amazing scientists, neurologists, academics doing research about the fact that if we truly do allow ourselves to experience the pain of being human all the way into a physiological response, right? Like right now, even my throat's a little bit scratchy, right? Or often, if I'm healing something else in a particular moment, my heart will actually ache, or sometimes my stomach feels like someone hit it, right? So if we have the courage to really compassionately allow the suffering, like feel that pain so fully, such that that physiological response shows up. We're not just in our head thinking of it's there. If in that same time we're allowed to be aware that we are that love, we are that big, so hard to put words on it, but we're actually, yes, we're kind of feeling it, but who we really are is this invisible consciousness that is holding and listening and loving and actually trusting that we're going to be okay, such that we'll go there. That's my experience of heaven on earth, that the love that I am, the Holy Spirit, comes down into this human and truly heals the human aspect of me, such that there's less human ego self-identification and just more original innocence, more authentic self. But there is something magical that happens when we do both at the same time. And I can describe it so simply, if a small child runs into mum, right? Maybe they've been bullied or something happens, right? That's our human. If we have the courage, like we did when we were 5, to just completely feel it, that's the compassion, letting ourselves get into our human, not be above and forgive from an ivory tower, but ouch, this life hurts. But it's crazy. We're multidimensional beings. We can feel that pain and have that compassion, but also be the mum that beautiful little kid is running into, right? I do this self-healing work so often, and obviously help my clients with it, but we can both feel the pain and be that energy that's like listening to ourselves and flooding ourselves with the loving. And it's,
Wow.
I struggle to put it in words because it truly is beyond words, but
Yeah.
it's like when a small child runs into mum, like you can't explain how that hug is
Yeah.
healing. You can't explain why that bullying now is no longer gonna affect the trajectory of that child. That kid now knows they're safe, they get heard, they're honored, they're trusted, they get the love that they need. But that hug just completely saved and perhaps healed an unnecessary trajectory. And we all get that as mothers, as fathers, but we have that profound ability for ourselves. And that actually is why I think self-compassion is so profoundly challenging, but so important. Because if a friend runs in or a child runs in and says, oh, this happened, blah, 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 I failed at this, my compassion just whoosh, rushes to them like, oh, I'm so sorry. I feel that for you. It wasn't your fault. You're doing your best, right? Like the loving, the compassion floods. It is very, very hard. And it is a very unique skill to really learn how to flood compassion on ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I won't get too much into the academics of it all, but their psychology from the T's all the way through the 80s really believed some harmful things in terms of self-esteem and in terms of feeling better about ourselves because of extrinsic things. Like I'll feel like in the 80s, self-esteem blew up, and then correlated with that, bullying, narcissism, and perfectionism also expanded after that.
Wow.
Because
it's interesting.
Instead of just feeling like I'm lovable, no matter if I'm skinny or if I have lots of money, I'm lovable, which is essentially self-compassion. We started to go, oh, I'm gonna be fit and have, like, the world started to really base its sense of loving and achievement on extrinsic things. And unfortunately, we're still coming back from that. And the reason that that's really appropriate for right now, and just appropriate, I believe, for all of us, is that it's very hard for us to just naturally have self-compassion for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If someone comes in and says, oh, I lost the job, I failed at this project, I fell down, I'd be like, don't worry, you did your best, whoosh, like love. If I do that, what the fuck's wrong with you? Do harder, cold, hard, punish, kick. And I'm much better at it now, but we're all on that journey, I believe, of like when we're really having a tough time, what is the energy that we have for ourselves? Is it soft? Is it kind? Is it truly grounded in, hey, it's really hard being a human. We're all doing our best. It's hard to see all the different things that we're contending with, karma and trauma, and we're all trying to do so many things at one time. But I believe that we've all been conditioned to a certain extent into motivating ourselves with self-criticism and punishment. And there is now a whole flood, thanks to Dr. Kristen Neff, that basically proves that self-compassion is far more motivating than self-criticism and even self-esteem. But up until the 80s, we didn't believe that. We actually thought we needed to be self-critical in order to change and be motivated. Now we have all of this research that says, no, if we're self-compassionate, even to the point of like nurturing ourselves the way that we would nurture a baby to walk, right? It's like, oh, you fell over, you did your best. Oh, you didn't go to the gym this week. Oh, that's okay. Like, that's okay. You're doing your best. That is the most motivating experience that we can give ourselves. But unfortunately, I still, even though I tell people this all day, every day, and I'm doing my best to grow, like I still struggle with not wanting to kick myself and punish myself when I fall over, when I make a mistake, when whatever happens. But continuing to have compassion for ourselves, really have understanding that it's far harder being human than any of us will ever grok. It's hard. If we can just let ourselves off the hook, know that we're doing our best, that energy, well, talking about healing and creativity, I believe that is the energy that we need. It's that comparison, that competition, that criticism that doing something for an external value,
Yeah.
it's actually profound short term, but it does not work long term. And it's now correlated with addiction, stress, exhaustion. It just doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. So,
Um,
because I feel like I learned something here, and that this compassion thing, it's like you're not in your head. So you have some shit happen, and you're feeling horrible about yourself, right?
Yep.
Whatever that horrid comment or statement is in your head.
Yep.
And but it's not just I'm a horrible human being, I'm a failure. There's so you allow yourself into this emotional piece of it.
Yep.
Really allow yourself to feel the emotion.
Yes.
But at the same time, so get into that true human experience.
Yep.
Allow it.
Yep.
But at the same time, you're saying bring in this, I want to call it a higher power.
Yes.
Of who you really are, and allow that to be in presence with this emotion.
Yes.
Yes. That's
and
awesome.
it is so profound, and I geek out on this so much. I'll try and get too giddy like a schoolgirl. But Dr. Dan Siegel, he is a psychiatrist, but he started to do all of these images, all of this he calls
Neuroimaging?
interpersonal neurobiology. It's basically a new field where it's basically it's a field of neuroscience, but it's kind of has its application in psychiatry, where we can really see, well, how is the brain healing? Not just as a woo-woo,
Yeah.
I love you, oh, I'm healing.
Right.
Like, actually, how do those neural pathways? Because we can see it when a traumatic event happens, whether or not through grief or abuse, the neural pathways start to just not look good, right? They're like, all of a sudden we're showing up in fight or flight. The limbic system, that amygdala, we're basically operating on fight and flight rather than trust and our advanced brain, which is rational and reasonable and makes really great decisions. So we can actually see that, there is a neuro aspect to healing.
Yeah.
And so Dr. Dan Siegel has doing this amazing research, and it's I'm sure it's debatable still at this point. It's his leading edge, but his premise is that in order to rewire our neural pathways, we just need two things at the same time. And they're the two things that we've just been talking about. First, a physiological, embodied, emotional response of whatever is challenging. So just really being able to get into the body. So if we're talking about grief and heartache, you've got to get in and you've got to feel the heartache. If you're working with an anger response, you've got to have the courage to really feel that anger in your body. But then also at the same time, and usually this is through a practitioner, but I love sharing about self-healing, but generally this is in the context through working with a professional, that if you can get into your body and be in that physiological response, that's the first thing that you need. If you can then have that compassion, that love flooded to you, either from someone else or this is the ultimate for me, knowing, because I'm a spiritual being, I really am the love that I need. I can do that for myself. And we now know that whether or not it's through a practitioner or through yourself, if you can have that embodied challenge, that physiological response, and you can flood yourself with that loving, that compassion. In essence, give yourself the love that you needed when you created these neural pathway breakdowns. They do start to heal over time. So that's the great news. All things can be healed. The bad thing, I think, is just that is how incremental healing takes place.
Yeah.
Everyone wants it to be one. I talked about that happening once. Why aren't I healed? I talked about it twice. Why aren't I healed? And I think it's wonderful that now this neuroimaging is really showing us yes, it's actually quite a slow burn in terms of how those neural pathways, they talk about the neurons that wire together. They've been wired for a long time. When I feel sad, I'm punishing myself. I feel like I'm a failure. So that's what we've wired sadness with, punishment or criticism or whatever it is. So it does take quite a while to oh, I'm sad. I'm going to now wire that. I'm going to pattern that up with compassion, with kindness, with loving, with self-forgiveness. But little by little, it's absolutely inevitable. Like, we will be able to clear those triggers of like fight and flight, those moments when something happens and all of a sudden it's not our nature, but we want to kill someone, or we feel like, we're an absolute victim. We can really rewire those triggers. So instead of feeling that, we can just see the situation objectively, kindly, rationally, lovingly, but it does take time.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we have to, and I will say that's the great thing about this life, though. Like, I've never had to dig for my own healing. It's not like, oh, today I'm gonna address my mum's death. No, it's like, what'll happen is like, oh, a friend didn't text me back, or my boss was mean to me, or whatever it is. These emotional imbalances will find us where we live, and if we have the courage to feel them fully, they will. And we don't even have to be aware that they're tracked back to those core wounds. We just have to have the courage to feel them in the moment.
So I envision myself with war paint on, running around the backyard, perhaps no clothes on, screaming, really feeling it.
Was this like yesterday?
Yeah. And my wife comes home and she says, "What's going on?" And I'm like, somebody cut me off today. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess, but I'm obviously a more controlled thing. But I mean, I guess when you get into this, joking aside, what comes to mind when you say this is, I think I've done what you're saying, but I didn't realize I was doing it.
Yeah.
Because, I developed this adult onset, anxiety and crippling, couldn't really talk to anybody kind of thing. I can remember sitting in class and deciding that I was going to share, and I don't really remember what we were talking about, but I was sharing in front of the group, and there's probably 150 people in the room, and I'm bawling my eyes out, crying almost like a little child. After the point that I did that, I have never felt the same ever again. Ever. And despite years of doing other things, I did this one thing where I said, you know what? I'm going to be a little risky because nothing else is working, and I'm just going to show up. I know I'm in a safe place, so I can do this. But there was something strange about not only was it, I think what you're talking about, which was really feeling it, but also having this, because the other thing was that I never knew about this idea that I am love. That has always come to me, and people may be like, shut up, dude, like whatever. It's like that concept for me was so life altering. But then I think that what you're talking about was the coming together of those two, but in a group and sharing in a way that was vulnerable, fundamentally shifted my entire experience of life. I felt like I got my life back.
That 100%. Right. And what a courageous, what an act of self-love and self-honoring, even to just do that. Right. And you can't do that without trusting yourself, without loving yourself, without listening to yourself. And then that supernatural, spiritual extra juice of all those other beings in the room, of the intention of clearly of the action of that. Yeah. How incredibly miraculous, genuinely.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that too. Yeah.
And from a person who was observing this, this was, when he talks about crippling anxiety, I remember witnessing it, and I thought Steven's being so weird right now. And then, we'd be out to dinner with a group of people, and I think, oh, something's going on. And then Steven then described it to me. He's like, oh, this is just an anxious moment. Then, and I think you did mention that it was after medical school and then he comes back from class and he talks about what he's learned about it, and then what he's learned about it kind of up in his head a little bit. And then after a few more months, all of a sudden it is gone. I never saw it again.
Yeah.
And I think seeing someone change, like being in the presence of someone who can change something that they've been trying to and just without success, and then finally getting to that success,
Yes.
was just very inspiring for me to see. And I think it made me really impressed with him as a person, but then also with this belief system that helped create that healing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very impressive. What did you call it? What did you call it, Zoe? The magical juices?
Yeah, something like that.
Something like, yeah, I need to write it down. You said it better. But I think, we got to learn quite a lot about forgiveness, the importance of compassion from a woo perspective and from a evidence-based perspective. And I think it'd be cool if we can just do, maybe this podcast could just be called evidence-based woo-woo.
There you go. I love it.
Marry the two.
I do think it's an exciting time to be alive because, technology and science is just moving forward at such a rate.
Yeah.
That who knows, maybe in 10 years, we really will be able to prove that there is this thing called, whether or not you call it love or the Holy Spirit,
right,
or the universe, but I really do believe we will be able to prove that there is this web running through all things that is always supporting us, always loving us. Really, there is a rhyme and a reason.
Yeah.
Everything that happens, and it'll come a day when I think scientifically we'll be able to see that, but just more and more we'll be able to prove love and self-kindness and compassion and all the things that we know in our heart to be.
Right.
But the science will catch up. I think it's just very, very
exciting. I think the science is the science to me is fun. It's really neat, but once you've experienced the actual process, it's like, I get that a lot of my friends are like, I don't need the science.
Yes.
But, but some of us feel called, and certainly I do, to know that, a lot of this work has been very healing for my family and bringing us together, and my own part in playing a role in all of that, in healing and being able to connect more with my parents, and just everybody around me. So, but that, for me, that experience of life, for me, family is a huge value, and to be able to show up and be silly and say what I want and have fun, and it's life altering. And so I know that that I've experienced something that works, but to let science play around with it and try and figure out what's going on, it's like, it's great that we have that I know that there are paths that work, and yet there's other people that if you are still in your head, that science can be a path into these arenas where healing can occur, or you can create, or you can allow grace to come through you. I mean, these things that can come from this world. But for me, the science is kind of this bridging for a lot of the mind, getting out of the mind and into the work. And so I really embrace both of them. So I think our podcast should be called Evidence.
Oh, that's
what I was trying to get at.
Yeah.
I'm still with you, right? And I do think that there is such a massive surrender component of it all, right? Because I do think that you could probably give all the formulas and all of the science and all the neuroimaging to someone, right? And it really be very rational, but it's still a very scary surrender. It's a leap of faith to actually do some of the things that we're talking about, to actually feel our heartache, to actually really deeply love another human being, knowing that there is never, ever any guarantee that you're going to be loved back, or that they're going to be around tomorrow, because life happens, right? It's there to really experience this love that we're talking about. yes, science might be a nice, hopefully, springboard for some, but at some point we do
Yeah.
have to let go and surrender and
Yeah.
get out of the mind that got us there and into the mess, into the pure
Yeah.
magic and mess.
Love it.
That's great. The magic and mess. Well, I think I don't actually know. Did we say 7:30 or I'm sorry, did we say are we getting close to are we supposed to ask our last question now? Sorry, I know we're
Oh, I don't
recording, but-
know. I don't know when
I
we're
have,
gonna.
I have a hard stop at, I guess it's at 5:30 my time.
Okay. Okay. So that would be 7:30 our time. Okay, so in 30 minutes.
Yes, correct.
Okay, great. Great. We'll edit that part out. Like, what time is it? Okay, should we ask our last question?
Sure.
Did we need more about original innocence?
Oh, I'm sure we could talk for hours on original innocence.
You know, I don't think I actually asked you to define original innocence. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Oh, my
As,
God.
you
Another question I will have to say I do not know how to do.
Okay. Well, let me ask the question.
I don't know either.
Yeah,
We're just using the word.
yeah, Steve
Feels
and I,
good.
I told you that we want this podcast to be and the programming of L36 to be digested by folks that maybe just starting to dip their toe in. Maybe they're in the professional world and they do some meditating and they know there's more magic and there's more mess out there for them to go through.
Yes.
And so when Stephen brought up original innocence, I thought, to me, that sounded like a beginner's mind.
Yep.
And beginner's mind in the Buddhist practice, which is what I'm most comfortable with, is said to be the most challenging to approach something from the mind of a child. And I thought that was, but there's more to original innocence than just like being a good, fresh, blank slate. There's more of the actual innocence of who you are, and the real you is there. Yes. And so that all being said, can you explain original innocence to us and in what it means to become your authentic self?
Yeah. I'll do my best and I'll share whatever is present. Whilever we're in a human form, I don't believe personally that we can get there and hold it, right? Whilever we're breathing, we're clearly here to keep learning. So we're going to have moments of falling into a false self or just not being completely open and free and only being aware that we are our authentic self. So I just love, and I could literally talk for hours about this beautiful gift of original innocence. Well, it's who we really are. For me, if we think about when we come into form and we're just that beautiful baby, right? Just that nothing's happened to us, right? It's just we're infinite joy. And I relate this to my clients a lot. A lot of us think that we're here to work hard or to try and push and control ourselves into doing or being creative or even doing healing. But I do believe that we came in with this spark, this power, this original innocence, and you could call it light or soul or, you could put lots of different words on it, but just this joy that, like, you put a kid on a playground, like, you don't need to coach it to choose the sandbox versus the monkey bars. You don't need to tell it to run. Like, they come they just run. And they just play and they connect, and like, that's who we are. And so that's why I call my practice and what I do most of the time uncoaching, because you don't need to tell any human being or coach any human being once they're in that beautiful place. And I do believe that we all have moments of it, right? maybe we just have such an amazing time with our family, and all of a sudden, for whatever reason, we've dropped our guard, we've dropped our facade. We're not in our coping mechanisms. We're just pure, innocent. We're in our authentic self. And those are the magical moments. Those are the moments when we're so happy and so connected and life just seems perfect. So we all have them. So it's just much more about, how can we be aware of, there's something other than original innocence going on. I'm bitchy, I'm judging, and I'm really having a hard time. And so for me, it's how can I pick those little moments up like small children? For me, it's easiest to access them through the emotion, but there are so many ways to healing.
Mm-hmm.
How can I pick up those little moments of being bitchy or whatever that is? How can I just love them and truly release them, clear them, so that what's left is me, which is this beautiful being that just wants to play, wants to love, wants to be of value, is creative in and of myself. And I think that's also what's so beautiful about what you're doing going to Italy, and just this beautiful premise that we haven't really touched on, but which is beauty. Good luck being in that original innocence and experiencing that, and not just every single thing connected to that being beyond beautiful, right? It's just everything appears beautiful. You are, it's that's just really what it is. But it's, and I sometimes see a lot of people almost get into an inaccurate way of trying to hone in on it, in that they're trying to be originally innocent, or they're trying to be optimistic or kind. In my experience, well, the Rumi quote that actually I think Mary Hulnick quoted in your movie trailer, which was, our task is not to seek for love, but to seek and find all the barriers that we've built between us, and to heal and dissolve them. And so really for me, that's the original innocence. It's like, it's always in there. It's always waiting. It's who we are. But life happened, so we learned to be a good little girl, or we learned to facade up, and that's okay. But throughout our life, we have so many beautiful opportunities to continue to release those facades, those protections, those parts of us that would try to be anything other than just absolutely 100% who we are in this present moment.
Beautiful.
What comes to mind is, I find that, you talk about breaking down these walls and facades and breaking the barriers. Music seems to do that for me. So we listen to music a lot. And I think we said earlier, we dance a lot. But sometimes when we get to dancing with our little girl, we're just being goofy. That there are these moments where I'm not sure if it's me that's looking through the lens or something else, but it says, I think I'm going to take this memory with me onto the next one, And it's like, but it's like we've broken down. We're having a tremendously fun time, and all of a sudden this other being says, I let me just capture this moment. Like, let me just take a little Polaroid of it, because this is such a special moment for me. And I know it's not going to last forever. And I'm just in it right now. And that's where that's like the juicy part of life for me. That's great. But getting there, it takes a little bit of work for me. But it's funny that I find music, when I don't really want to do the work, music seems to help, especially 80s pop.
I love it. 80s, it's blasting. I love it though, because when we were talking about love languages at one point, like Steven and I were like, oh, what are your love languages? We're talking about it. And one of my favorite things about Steven is he'll just say something that you just don't expect, like out of left field. And he'll say, it felt like left field for me, but he was like, I think music's my love language. And I'm like, that's not one of the love languages in the book. He's like, yeah, but it is mine.
I just
Mine.
So but it's also so fascinating what you say, Zoe, about, but of course we would do this. I didn't even think that we would perform original innocence, that's something that like, that we learn about this place we're supposed to access. And it's like, oh, it becomes another egoic drive to be, to access. I am more enlightened than you, and I'm going to perform that for you. And yeah, but
almost the Yoda, there is no try. Right. Whenever we're trying, we're gonna, it gets a little too philosophical, but
yeah.
It's interesting because when you talk about the freedom and the play, it's hard not to think about our kids because, we have these stairs. Our podcast room is upstairs, and the stairs are pretty dangerous. And we have this rule: we do not play on the stairs. And we go up and down with our kids constantly, and the rule is do not play on the stairs. And I can't tell you how difficult it is to follow that rule because they, we're going down the stairs, and I realized that it clicked. She's being a frog or something, and on the stairs, I'm like, remember, what's the rule? She's like, we do not play on the stairs. Ribbit, ribbit, ribbit. And I'm like, oh, she is play. There is no distinction between living and playing for her.
Yeah.
And I kind of took a lesson in that and thought maybe I should not separate those two so much. Maybe I could allow my work and my play to just kind of overlap a little bit more everywhere else but the stairs.
I love that, Nina. That's so beautiful. It is hard for us and our big craniums, but we could follow the children.
Yeah.
And
it's so interesting what you say too, that there's science behind these big feelings only lasting about 90 seconds. And I would say that if there are big feelings in our kids, they don't last longer than 90 seconds.
Yeah.
It must not be a coincidence. We don't get 5-minute cries. She feels them fully.
Yeah.
And then they're gone. Or I don't know what happens to them, but
yeah, I do. Don't get me started talking about emotions in general. I just think it's the most misunderstood aspect of being human. But the way that we relate to emotions before we've been conditioned to relating to our emotions is just the healthiest way, right? We lose our toy, we fall apart, right? And that's probably an accurate response. Like when you're a little kid, your toy's everything, right? So you just absolutely fall apart. But then mum picks you up, you get some love, you're safe again. And it's like, oh, lollipop. And off you go.
Love it.
Right?
Right.
And it is, if we were to look at it, right, emotion is just energy in motion. Metaphysically, is my experience. It's just energy that wants to rip through our body and clean us out. And the experience that I have had with the grief in my life is that if we do hang in with any emotion, all that we're left with is love. Right? If we keep on feeling all the way through to the very end, everything at the end of the day is just love. That's the only thing that we care about. That's the only thing that there is. Whether or not we're really sad, then all of a sudden we feel all that sadness, that bitterness dissolves until we're just left with, oh my God, we feel this way because we love so much. Even anger. All anger is just because we love so much. But often we thwart ourselves of that experience by going, nope, I'm not an angry person, or nope, I don't have time to be sad today, or whatever it is. But we could learn a lot just by the way that kids let that energy in motion just whoosh, move through their beautiful little form, and then it's done. Next.
I love it.
Awesome.
I love it. Well, Zoe, can I ask you our last question?
Do it.
So what would you say, and you don't have to pick one if there are several, but what is your driving question right now at this point in your life?
This may be surprising, but what's coming present right now is, why do I care so much about animals? I love my healing work, But then I adopted a dog, and he became a TikTok star. And so now I'm helping multiple organizations with animal rescue. And my preview about it is that I really do believe that animals, just as children do, really help us find greater compassion for ourselves, because my dog's got a big online following. A lot of my clients now have come to me because they're just devastated after losing a dog. And as we all know, dogs don't live long enough, but there is something as to why, we can watch a movie and human after human can get killed, but then all of a sudden, like, one dog or one horse gets hurt, and we're like, wow.
Literally, I'm like, who directed this? Turn the garbage off.
And my curiosity, and so the question is, like, what is it about animals and me, right? Like, I really thought I was just going to be this wonderful therapist, like helping the humans, but now I'm like, I think I'm going to even have an animal sanctuary in the next 5 years. It's
so
wild.
cool.
I can't understand it, but there is something about they're originally innocent.
Mm-hmm.
They're defenseless, they're helpless, but in the most beautiful way. Like, and like, my dog almost feels like a better limb, right? It's like, we just have so much love. And anyway, I've seen so many people have such a hard, tough go of it, and their love for animals has been almost their spiritual liberation into knowing compassion, so that they might have self-compassion and self-love. So I'm following this thread of, why am I writing a book about pet grief, and why do I care so much about animals? But if I were to be prophetic, I think it's because I'm unpacking animals as a really beautiful tool and guides for compassion, for spiritual healing, for forgiveness, for compassion.
Amazing. I can't wait to see you answer this question. I can't wait to see what follow and and read this.
Half of me would love to end up with an animal sanctuary and hundreds of animals, and the other half of me goes, that sounds like the worst thing ever. Like, my life is complicated enough as it is. So I know that I will continue to surrender, and I know my original innocence will guide me forward. It'll be fun.
Yeah.
To see how it all rolls out.
Oh my gosh, it's exciting, Zoe. Wow. I guess we should.
Thank you, Zoe.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And
thank you so much. So fun and so amorphous, as was prophesied.
Yes.
Well, great. Well, so this concludes another episode of L36 Podcast. Zoe, thank you so much for coming on, and we'd love to talk to you more later on. So thank you.
Thank you.